Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is author Zeeva Bukai. We're going to be talking about her book, The World Between. Zeeva, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about the world between and the creative writing life.
No, that's fantastic. That is exactly what we were hoping to talk about. And for those who are familiar with the show, we'd like to start things off talking about anything we may have read or watched lately. Did we like it? Did we hate it? Are we very indifferent about it? Like, I don't ever want to have anything to do with that ever again. I'll go first just to give Ziva a little time to collect her thoughts. Last week was very busy for me for my outside of the podcast stuff, so I didn't get to watch as much stuff. But my wife and I did finish on HBO Max. There's a two-part documentary about Mel Brooks, and so we'd watched the first part 2 weeks ago, and so this past weekend we got to watch the second part, which is the latter half of his career up to the present, and just really entertaining stuff. And some of that, you watch that, and it makes you want to go back and watch some of the films that he's done over the course of his career. And also, I totally forgot about the producers. I knew about the movie, but I forgot about the Broadway one. And so that was a great section of
Yeah.
that documentary. And also, I am still working my way, I don't have the copy here with me, is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. Just this great, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a college course about how comics work, comic books and comic strips. It's just fascinating. And there's just the way he breaks it all down. He's explaining everything. I'm only about a third of the way through, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm really glad I found it. So that's it for me. So
That sounds
Ziva.
great. In terms of watching something, I recently saw a great documentary about Katharine Hepburn, speaking of old time actors,
Wow.
and it was, just her life was really fascinating, and the amount of confidence that she grew up with, not just that she had because of her career and the success that she had there, but she actually grew up with a mother who was a feminist. She had a real sense of herself as a woman in the world, as someone who was powerful, not someone who was powerless, especially at that time. So I really found her whole story quite fascinating. And of course, I love her movies with Spencer Tracy. My
Hmm.
favorite one is Pat and Mike. Um,
Okay.
and it's about her being kind of a sports person, a sportswoman, and he's a manager and a bookie as well. So, and they have this wonderful relationship where she's that kind of this high toned, high class woman, and he is this sort of kind of down and not down and out, but this guy from the Bronx who's kind of really off the cuff, and it's just their the chemistry they had together was just absolutely amazing. And in terms of what I just finished reading, I'm trying to remember the title of it, and I'm always forgetting the title, but it's a book by Sasha Vasiliak, and she won the Sammy Rohr Prize for this book, and it's about I think it's based on her grandfather's life, where he was in the Soviet army, and he was also a POW in a German camp. And because he had been caught, he it was a huge embarrassment and shame for Soviet soldiers to have been caught by the Germans
Hmm.
and to have survived, right? Um, so I thought the book was absolutely fascinating, and I'm just trying to think of the title, and it'll come to me at some point, and
Sure.
I'll probably interject it at some point in the podcast. But I believe, what was that title? Something like you are the idea of. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I'm so sorry you caught me flat-footed here, but
That's okay.
it'll
It'll
come to
come to
me.
you
Yeah,
when we
it'll come
least
to me.
expect it,
Yeah, yeah.
or right after we stop recording. You'll be like, I
Of
remember
course.
what it is now.
Of course, and then I'll give it to you. And if you want, you can put it in your, you know, in your titles or something. But
Okay.
yeah.
Nevertheless, we will
Yes.
press on. So we're talking again to Zeeva Bukai, and we're going to be talking about her new book, "The World Between." Now, Ziva, what I like to do is I like to read the about the author section on the book. Zeeva Bukai was born in Israel, raised in New York City, and is the author of a previous novel, "The Anatomy of Exile." Her stories have appeared in, there's a big list: Smashing the Tablets, a radical retelling of the Hebrew Bible; Carve Magazine; Pithead Chapel; The Lilith Anthology; Frankly Feminist, Stories by Jewish Women; December Magazine; McSweeney's Quarterly Concern; Image Journal; JewishFiction.net; Women's Quarterly Journal; and The Jewish Quarterly. She is the Assistant Director of Academic Support at SUNY Empire State University and lives in Brooklyn with her family. All right, so Ziva, what I like to start off is talking a little bit about you as in your background. Were you always a writer? Were you a voracious reader as a child? I mean, how did you get into writing? Was it something you've always been inclined to do, or was it something you came into a little bit later in life?
Okay, so I came into writing a little bit later in life. I actually began my like young life studying theater and acting. So it is no wonder that the main character in this book is a 66-year-old Yiddish actress, right? A
Hmm.
former Yiddish actress. Um, so I studied acting. I studied acting both in the US and in Israel. I went back to Israel when I was 18 years old. I came here when I was 4, but I returned when I was 18, and I went to Tel Aviv University for 2 years, and then switched into a kind of drama conservatory at the Seminar L'Kibbutzim, which was really a teacher's college, but they had a very good um, dramatic dramatic school there. And I studied with some amazing people, both at Tel Aviv University and at the Seminar L'Kibbutzim. Um, and and one of them I'm still in contact with. He was the assistant director of the National Theater in Israel, and he and I are still in contact. The other teachers that I had, one of them was Nola Cheldon, who won the Israel Prize for her documentary theater, and she was really a social a social theater both critic and director and acting teacher, and um, her work was really seminal in Israel. She was American. She went to Israel, I think, in the late '60s, and grew the theater there. And I also studied with this man by the name of Benjamin or Binyamin Tzemach. And what's interesting about him is that he was quite elderly when I worked with him. His brother, along with this young Jewish Moscow troupe, went to both Europe and Israel in the early 20s. They had studied under Stanislavski,
Mm,
who was like theater's main guy, right?
sure.
Moscow theater. And they were the ones who actually started Habima, the National Theater of Israel. So there I am studying with Natan Semach's brother, Benjamin, who had lived in the United States for many years, worked in Hollywood, was a choreographer here in the States, um, and was very much part of the Yiddish theater here. So a lot of that early life of mine really informed this book in many ways.
Hmm.
And then in terms of writing, I mean, I loved reading as a child. I still remember like the first book that I sat down and read from cover to cover. So there were two. One was a collection of short stories by Hans Christian Andersen
Okay.
that, I mean, I just remember the girl. I don't know if you remember this story called The Bread Loaf, and it still sticks
Mm.
in my mind of the girl and the bread loaf or something like that. And it was about a girl who had to buy bread for her family. And then there is, I think, like a some she goes somewhere or there's a torrential rainstorm that creates this kind of stream, and she needs to get to the other side, and the only way she can do that is by standing on the loaf and getting to, I don't know why this story stuck with me, but it did. And then and the other book was Little Bear. Oh my God, I adored Little Bear and this sense of um, Little Bear's courage and stepping outside in the world, right? And imagining going to space, and then being able to go home and getting the warmth of his mother. Just again, that something about that story really struck.
Hmm.
It kind of was very close, it struck very close to home, and really spoke to me, really resonated with me. So I began there, and later on read other things. Like I read this wonderful book called The Last Step by Esther Hautzig, which was about a Jewish family in Siberia.
Mm.
And I read that when I was in the fifth or sixth grade. Again, a book that stuck with me. And I actually read it before I started this book again, because I had been researching for the book. And that was one of the things that I kind of returned to.
I
Um,
was going to say, so okay, it's a lot of reading from your younger days. So,
yes.
what was it that, I mean, maybe inspired that drive to like I want to start writing? I mean, I was going to say like if you had a big background in dramatics and working in the theater department, a lot of actors, they're not writers, and the ones who decide I want to give it a try, they discover it's a lot different being on that side of the page, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
what was it that kind of steered you in that direction to pick up a pen and start writing?
So I began writing as a young teenager at about 12 or 13. And I remember writing my first, I was writing poetry, and I wrote my first short story was when I was 14. And then kind of stopped and started and stopped and started again. When I went to Israel, I thought that I would be studying English in the English department, but I kind of met all of these people who were studying acting, and I thought, gosh, this looks like so much fun. Let me do
Hmm.
this. And I took playwriting classes for years and just thought, I really stink at this. This is not this is not what I should be doing, right? And so everything I wrote, as a playwright was so melodramatic that it was awful. So I decided that's not where I was going. That's not what I was going to do. By the time I finished my BFA in theater, I was married and I had a young child. And I just thought, I can't spend that much time away from home. And I
Hmm.
started taking courses again in poetry. And I studied with Joan Larkin, who's an amazing poet, who really kind of encouraged me. And I was sitting in on her master's classes. I mean, I kind of did that for quite a while, and then began taking kind of short story courses as well, right? How to write the short story and things like that, creative writing. Um, and really found my voice there, I think, because I realized that all the poetry I was writing was very narrative. They were
Hmm.
all telling a story in one way or another. And by the time I really kind of came into writing fiction, I really felt like there was a big learning curve for me. It did not happen quickly. And
Hmm.
I just really felt like I was determined. I mean, I was really persistent in trying to learn how to do it. So, I mean, I read voraciously. Um, I sort of read craft books, but not that many. It was really about reading literature and trying to figure out how the writer created character, plot, how they developed the plot, how the rising and falling action. And a lot of it felt very, very familiar to me because of theater,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I've read hundreds of plays,
Sure.
right? And, you begin to learn the rhythm of how a scene sort of rises, the climax of a scene, not even an act, but a scene, right?
Hmm.
And then the falling action, and then again another rise for the next scene, right, and another climax, and all of this building towards the climax of the play, and then of course the falling action, the denouement, and the resolution. So all of that felt familiar, and the only way that I seemed to be able to write was as an actor, not necessarily as a writer. I
Hmm.
know that sounds
Okay.
very strange, but to be able to create character I kept thinking about how I created character as an actor, right? There was both the internal and the external. And so the internal was this kind of interior monologue that's going on, where you begin to learn about the, I'm going to use the word again, interiority of the character, right? Like what that inner landscape looks like. And then of course building out what had happened to this person to bring them to this moment, and what again happened in the past that's going to take them into the future. What do they leave behind and what do they take with them? And the big question for me when I'm creating character is, what is the character's objective? Why are they doing what they are doing? Why
Hmm.
do they behave the way they're behaving? What is instinctual and what is learned? What is learned behavior? What is their instinct, their kind of self protective instinct? How are they going to break up with somebody, for example? Are they going to pretend that it's all okay and then go fall apart off stage, right? Fall apart somewhere else? Or are they going to completely break down in front of their former partner? You know, who is the character? How are they going to respond to different stimuli? So
Okay.
the question is always, what does the character want?
Right.
And
Right.
the narrative is always driving that forward. Now, that for me is something that I learned as a theater person, right? Because
Uh,
it's always about, what does the character want? How do I get it? How do I get that thing that I need and want?
hmm Do you think you would have reached that conclusion if you had not had that experience? Because I was going to say, I originally was going to ask, what was it about writing narratives that seemed to really click for you? But it sounds like you kind of had to figure it out on your own, worked your way there, because you said like it was there was poetry, but there was also writing for theater and writing for acting, which is narrative in a kind of way. But narrative is, it's as you said, it's internal but also external, because we get to read what the character is thinking, or you get to describe how they feel, which is totally different in certain mediums. But I also wanted to ask, before we get too far off topic, so that how that all that applies to the world between. What I'd like to ask the guests is to uh, give what is essentially, I guess, the cocktail party pitch for the book. Like, how would you explain it? Like for screenwriting, we say, what's the log line for it? You know, give me your elevator pitch. And I know it's a little different for books. So if you could be so kind as to present that so people who are listening or watching know, okay, what is this book about? And take it from there.
Sure. So the novel is about a former Yiddish stage actress. It takes place in the 90s. After the breakup of her marriage to her playwright husband, Max, she returns to the apartment the two of them shared when they were young in Tel Aviv. Soon after she gets there, she finds herself in the St. Joseph of the Apparition hospice run by a group of nuns in Jaffa, Israel. It's unclear how she got there.
Hmm.
And so the entire novel is her piecing together what brought her to this moment. It's an epistolary novel in the sense that her psychiatrist, Dr. S, in the hospice, tells her that he wants her to keep a diary or to write a letter to her husband explaining why she's there and how she's getting better,
Hmm.
right? And so the entire novel is directed to her husband, Max. It is interspersed with, and she's telling her husband, Max, about this as well, with these sessions that she has with Dr. S, which invariably kind of lift uh, lift a memory. And what I mean by that is that these memories kind of rise in her and take over in a sense, where and she begins to talk about these things to Max, essentially to herself, to sort of figure out her life. And I just want to say that she was born in Poland, in Krosnowiec, Poland, which is where my grandparents were from. And they were deported to Siberia at the start of the war, again, like my grandparents.
Hmm.
Um, and she, along with her close friend Rothman, whom she loves, he really is the love of her life. She loves Max as well, but Rothman she knows from her childhood. And her relationship with him is a very complex one. It's a loving one, but it is very, it's it's a difficult relationship. It's not the easiest relationship. She
Hmm.
wants something from him that he cannot give her.
Right.
And so, but yeah, that's basically what the novel is about. And so it moves from Siberia to Israel and then to New York. Most of hers and Max's life was in New York. They probably get to the States in the 60s, and that's really the height and the dwindling of the Yiddish theater by that time. I mean, the Yiddish theater, or what they used to call the Jewish Rialto, right, or the Yiddish Rialto on the Lower East Side on Second Avenue, there must have been close to 20 Yiddish theaters there. Some of them began to move, the more serious ones, right, the ones who were really doing like very kind of important social plays and cultural plays and things like that, real dramas and not melodrama.
Hmm.
Those theaters began to move uptown. And for me, what was fascinating in the research for this was looking at the Adlers, right? Stella Adler, her sister Celia was considered the first lady of Yiddish theater,
Hmm.
and Celia was actually on Broadway with Marlon Brando in a play called, I think it was called "This Is Our Flag" or "Our Flag," and it was about refugees coming to the U.S. after the Second World War, and there's Celia literally playing opposite Marlon Brando, who at the time was studying with Celia's sister, Stella Adler,
Hmm.
who became a very famous teacher here in the US. And actually, I mean, she taught Marlon Brando, she taught Al Pacino, she taught some of the biggest theater names that we have in the United States. And really, she, along with Lee Strasberg, uh, Samuel Meisner, all of these all of these guys who spoke Yiddish at some point in their lives, right?
Hmm.
Really changed the face of theater in the United States. I mean, they had a huge influence in the way that actors began to act, and
Hmm.
all of it a kind of recreation uh, or the foundation was Stanislavski and the Moscow Art Theater.
Okay. Okay, that's the pitch for The World Between Us. So what was the inspiration for the story? I mean, you said it has a very colorful and extensive history, but what was it that made you decide, okay, this is what I want this story to be about? And also that leads into the question is that as you just explained that the character is keeping these diary entries. So it's told entirely in first person.
That's right.
And I was very curious why you decided to go with that approach as opposed to like a standard traditional prose format.
So I think the first person here, because it's a personal letter to her husband, for me, it made sense that it was going to be in first person.
Okay.
I also wanted a real intimacy here. And I don't think that I could have gotten the same level of intimacy with even a close third. So the first person felt very, very important. It also felt important in terms of who this woman is, right?
Hmm.
She is an actor. That is first and foremost how she processes the world, right? Of herself on stage, of putting on these different personas, of of hiding really who she is, of the childhood war trauma that she experienced, and how that bleeds into every aspect of her life, as well as the other characters, by the way. They
Hmm.
also go through this childhood war trauma. Max goes through it in the camps in Germany. She and Rothman go through it in a gulag in Siberia, where they were deported to. So again, I just felt like um, these stories were a way for me to process my own family history. My mother was born in a Siberian gulag. Well, she was
Hmm.
born in Orsk, which was right outside of Siberia, and then was further deported into Siberia, right?
Hmm.
She lived the first 5 years of her life in a children's home. So for me to kind of process that, the way that I process things is through fiction, because there's a kind of truth that I can get at there that feels to me even more real, which might speak to my own mental state, but which feels more real to me than kind of trying to understand what that experience must have been like for my mother, who never spoke about it.
Hmm.
She gave me one image that I use in this book, and that is getting her head shaved every week as a young child,
Mm.
right? Because of lice. It
Right.
didn't really get rid of the lice, but this was pro forma. This is what they did to all the children. Every single one of them had their head shaved if they were in the children's home.
Hmm.
So those kind of images work their way into the novel. And I really think that this compilation of using my theater background, thinking about my mother's history, my grandmother's history, um, all of that sort of becomes what this story is. It's embedded in different ways in this story.
Hmm.
Um, Once I decided that she was an actor, and once I wrote the first line of this book, I sort of, her voice felt very clear to me. And she is nameless throughout the story, deliberately nameless
Yeah,
throughout the
I had
story.
noticed that you never,
Yeah,
the main character never identifies themselves,
that's right.
but she knows everybody else's name.
That's right. She remains nameless because, again, it's this idea of putting on different personas. Who is she really? If we're looking at her identity of who she really is, she identifies as an actor, but she plays all of these different roles,
Hmm.
you know, and each one speaks to her as if it were her when she's playing that role.
Okay,
So again, it made sense not to give her a name, not to
sure.
fully kind of pin her down that way.
Hmm. I also noticed that the story kind of unfolds almost like on two separate timelines. There's, I guess, the present where she's at the hospice, but also a lot of the flashbacks, the memories that she's experiencing. So, why was it deliberate on your part to take that approach? Because it's not like you could do it in a linear fashion. Because if you're setting her up that, I'm in this hospice, I have to keep these diary entries, and it can't all of suddenly be, okay, I'm just going to write about, my childhood and then going to lead into my adolescence and my young adulthood, et cetera, et cetera. Was it, I guess, was that your intent from the outset? And also, was there a lot of, I guess, like a big board with all the cards? Okay, like first I'm going to have her start here, but also, what I thought was very interesting is that there are a lot of setups that you don't just explain things right away. Like the one thing about their child, I try not to do
Right.
spoilers, and so, but also that the setup about their child that leads into an experience she has while she's in Israel with this other woman's child, and
That's
that it's nothing is straight, nothing is really straightforward, and it's not that there's necessarily a lot of bouncing around. But I'm just curious if you had like the big board of, okay, I'm going to start here, and this is where this can go here, and this can go here. Okay, and right, this is a great scene. I could put this back over here, that sort of thing. Was that how you approached it, or what was your strategy for putting the story together?
So at first there was no strategy.
Oh,
At first there was um, this idea of here she is in this hospice, and you can see that she's not really doing many flashbacks at the beginning, right?
hmm,
It's as we move further into the story that these sessions with Dr. S begin to really kind of, if we're looking at her life as if it were a fabric, we're kind of pulling at threads, at disparate threads, right? It's not all from one section.
right.
So that's one. The metaphor that I had in my mind was that history, most personal history, uh, the history of the outer, the world at large is almost like I imagined it as a plate, as if I were dropping it, and the plate shatters, and then how do we get all of these shards and put them back together? Um, and her life, like I think all of our lives, the way that memory works is that we don't have linear memories.
Hmm.
We smell something and it elicits a memory. We see something and it elicits a memory. And we could have 5 or 6 different memories, maybe even more, in one day, right? That are from completely different timelines in our lives. So I wanted this sense of a woman who was fragmented, whose life is now fragmented, the way she is fragmented. I wanted the structure to resemble or mirror her mental state.
Hmm. Okay, I totally
Yeah.
get that. As you just mentioned, you talked about structure. I was curious if there were, while you were putting, I guess, the initial draft together, were there storylines or subplots that you thought, okay, I want to incorporate this, and maybe they didn't go anywhere, or you thought, okay, this is good, but then maybe you just had sudden inspiration. Oh, actually, if I make this little tweak, this will change it all together, but then I have to go back to where that started and redo the whole thing. Was the story as it is in the book? Was it more or less the same when you started, or were there a lot of drastic changes or just a lot of gradual changes as you were working your way through?
So there were some drastic changes as I
Hmm.
was working through it, and there were some gradual changes. And it really depended. So I'm definitely like a by the seat of your pants writer, you know
Okay.
what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I really believe that there is that in the subconscious mind that when I begin a story, I
Hmm.
don't know where it's going to go. I don't necessarily want to know where it's going until I get to about 100 pages. Then, once I'm at 100 pages, I'll go back and go to the beginning again. And I also edit as I go. So
Hmm.
for me, it's a slow process. There's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 3 steps back. Right.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'm always playing with that. Um, there were things where suddenly I was surprised by a storyline. For example, the play that Max writes, Die Blaue Dame, right, which means the blue lady.
Hmm.
I did not expect that play to have such resonance throughout the story.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
hadn't realized it was going to be that important to the story when I first mentioned it. As where it first came to me. Okay, yeah, he wrote this play, and it pissed her off. But why? And then, of course, I'm not going to give anything away, but we see the power of that play
Hmm.
in terms of both their marriage and their past life together. So that was a surprise for me. Rothman, who immediately appeared on the
Oh
page,
wow. Okay.
immediately, right? Her, I had to I worked on. I think first person narrative, right, um, is difficult because you need to reveal character without saying, I am this kind of a person, right?
Right.
So you need to reveal it through scene, dialogue, behavior, all of that.
Hmm.
That is more difficult than for me to take and to write from that point of view, as opposed to her being able to say who Rothman is, right? She can
Hmm.
do that. She can do that.
Well,
But
what's interesting is that because he is almost not a co-main character, but he's like the primary supporting character because he's
yes.
mentioned a lot
Oh
more than I
yeah.
was expecting him to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
mentioned. But also that he is, again, without doing any spoilers, he's almost like her guardian angel, that he is doing so much for her and from my perspective doesn't really ask that much in return. It's just like this, you're my friend, I'm going to help you in
Yeah.
all these different ways that he does. And it's, as you said, the more I think about it, I can understand why he would pop up almost fully formed in your imagination
Yeah.
while you're putting the story together. Because I would also expect that as he was first created, that he really didn't change much as you were putting the story together.
Right. What I needed to know about him was his backstory
Hmm.
and their relationship as children, right?
Hmm.
And the reasons why he can't be there for her the way she would want.
Hmm.
He cannot do that for her because
Right.
they are so close. I mean, Rothman, again, it comes down to the childhood war trauma. Who can you trust? Life is about getting over because otherwise it's going to mow you down. That's
Right.
Rothman, right? It's the next deal, So he was a scrounger. That's who he was. They survived because of him. They survived because of him, and because he would do anything to survive.
Hmm. Hmm. I actually wanted to ask you, so like a lot of times, like, because my primary writing field is screenwriting, and so a lot of
Yeah,
times characters in a screenplay, even small characters or in one scene, they are usually some aspect or some facet of the writer. Like it's of the writer's personality. And as you were explaining, like the inspiration for the story about your mother and your theater background, so it sounds like a lot of that went into the creation of the story, but also with the characters. Uh, are there characters in the book, even though it's all told from the one character's point of view, are there characters in the book that are maybe some reflection of your personality, but also of people who were influences on you? Like, I mean, did you know somebody, not somebody exactly like Rothman, but did you know people who were of that personality type?
I think so. Yes, absolutely. I think I've known a few Rothmans in my life.
Okay.
You know, of people who were incredibly wonderful to their friends, but don't get on the wrong side of them. People who would do anything to get by. I definitely knew people like that. So I knew Rothman types, and also Max. There is a scene in the book where she gives a description of Max where he's in a fedora and a cape,
Hmm.
you know. And he is the quintessential theater person, Max. It's how sees himself and how everyone else sees him. Well, I was talking to you about Benjamin Semach, that choreographer and acting teacher of mine for a short time in Israel. And I remember going to the theater one night and seeing him there in a black fedora, kind of, you know, rakishly on a,
At a jaunty angle.
on a jaunty angle, exactly, with a black cape. And I just thought, oh my God, this guy is like, one of these days I'm going to use that image. And you know what? I did. There it is. I mean, that's Benjamin Semach in my book. The Max is really more of a compilation, not a specific person. I mean, Rothman isn't a specific person either. And I never use one specific person. Every
Hmm.
character is always a compilation of my imagination and traits from people that I've known in my life, that I've come across, that I've seen, that I've heard of, wherever, we get stories from.
Hmm.
And I think the Sister Francois, there's a couple of teachers that I knew in life, um, this idea of kind of laying down the law, these nuns, Sister Francois most especially,
Yeah.
kind of moving through life almost like a mower. I mean, she just bulldozes.
Yeah, I was going to say very take no prisoners, and also not
Yes.
necessarily the same, but very reminiscent of Nurse Ratchet. So, but not
Yeah,
that harsh, not that
yeah,
harsh.
no, no, definitely not that harsh. As a matter of fact, there is a loving side to Sister Francois.
Hmm.
She can be very nurturing, and she can be nurturing to her. Um, Not a lot, but it's there. That nurturing aspect is definitely there. I think that Dr. S also a nurturer. So I've definitely known people like that.
Hmm.
Um, but and the other thing is that I think no matter what you write, you are everyone. It's like when you
Hmm.
dream, you're everybody in your dream, right?
Right.
In one way or another, even though you think it's somebody else, but it's all your, subconscious mind. And I think it's the same with writing. Whether we are acting out the part that we're writing or whether that's an aspect of you know, something that we've done or we feel that we're capable of doing, right? I
Hmm.
think that all of us placed in specific situations are going to act in ways that are antithetical to who we are in our everyday lives. So I think kind of many times the role of the writer is taking these characters and placing them in situations that are really difficult, full of obstacles, and that are painful. How does the character work their way out? For me, there's something cathartic in trying to figure out how the character works her way out of a specific situation.
Hmm. Oh, I
And
was good.
sometimes they don't.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that like that's true of like every kind of writing is that story is conflict.
Yes.
And there are a lot of chapters in the book, which again, world
Yeah,
between, and even like some chapters are of even like one page or a page and a
that's
half,
right.
and there is some kind of conflict on every kind of level. There's like I guess a very very small conflict about just some disagreement with someone or something that happened on the street, or the big conflict, the horrors of war that the character has had to go through, or what happens with this other family. And so it's just that you are able to incorporate a conflict on so many different levels throughout the course of the story. And I think that's part of why what makes it so intriguing is because it's seeing how the narrator character is presenting the situation, but also we get to see the conflict and also see how the characters react to it.
Absolutely. And again, I really feel like that comes from the drama background, this
Hmm.
idea that conflict creates dramatic tension, and dramatic tension for me is one of the most important aspects of writing,
Hmm.
right? I think that without that dramatic tension, how do you move the story forward? That's always a question for me. And so I feel like it's the dramatic tension that moves the story forward. It's the fact that the narrator is going to need to fix something or do something or grapple with something, and
Hmm.
the tension should be, I think, on a few different levels.
Hmm.
There's the inner conflict always, right? But then and the inner conflict needs to grapple with the outer conflict all
Right.
the time.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, you alluded to this a little earlier, is that parts of the story are very detailed, especially in terms of setting and really a lot of the scenes in Israel
Hmm.
that you mentioned specific locations, streets and businesses.
Right.
And I think you talked about research, but also since you lived there, I also wonder, like, how much research was involved in putting the story together? Was it story first, and like I can fill in the details later, or is it or you knew, okay, there's a place in Tel Aviv, or there's a
Hmm.
place I think it was in Jaffa, is
Yeah.
where the hospice is. You knew exactly where you wanted things to take place, so you're just able like, okay, I could put this street name here.
Right. So I did live in Israel for quite a while, and in Tel Aviv. So I know Tel Aviv and Jaffa quite well. But sometimes I would have to look up a street thinking, I know it's in that neighborhood, but what exactly is that street? So the Street of Shoes, where the
Mm.
apartment is actually a real place. Um, the Street of Shoes, it was named the Street of Shoes. The real name was Neve Sha'anan, but it was called the Street of Shoes because in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I think up until about the mid to late 70s, there were all of these small shoe factories there. So you'd have the factory in the back and the storefront in the front where they would sell the shoes. And that's why it was called the Street of Shoes for many,
Mm.
many years. This is how this particular character knows it because she lived there in the early 50s, right? And in terms of the hospice, well, that was based on a real place as well. So was the school next door called the Collège des Frères, which is actually still there. The hospice. So this this the Sisters of the Saint Joseph of the Apparition, which is really what it's called, the Sisters of the Saint Joseph of the Apparition. Um, was a school for girls at one point. The Collège des Frères was a school for boys,
Hmm.
and this was a school for girls run by the nuns. I, in my imagination, turned it into a a hospice. Right. This is what I turned it into. Today, it's so funny because I was in Israel back in December, and there I am walking on this street, and I suddenly see this plaque, and I go, "Oh my God, this is it! This is the place!" And I go inside. I'm with a friend. We go inside, and it's become this very shishi, beautiful place called Soho House. There's a bar and there's a sauna and there's a swimming pool and it's a members only club. There are a few of them globally. I think there's one in London. There's another one in
Okay.
New York City. I think there might be one in Barcelona. And here it is, this one in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, and it used to be this one place. And so, of course, there I am. I wasn't allowed to take pictures inside, but from
Hmm.
the outside, I took pictures and I actually posted it on my Facebook page saying, "This is where my book takes place. This is it right there." You know, so it was incredible. It was an incredible feeling to see it there and to feel like this is exactly what I was talking about. Now, I hadn't seen this place in many, many years,
Hmm.
but I kind of knew about it in the back of my mind. And when I began researching sections of Jaffa and where to place this book, I came across the Collage de Frères and I go, oh my God, I remember this place. And then I remembered the building right next door, which is very beautiful. They call it the turret house because there are two turrets, that rise up into the sky. And over the Collage de Frères, there's actually an image of Saint Joseph,
Hmm.
right? I mean, all of this is very, very beautiful. And I was thrilled to see it. You see palm trees rising. I mean, it's just lovely.
Okay, that's great. Because I love when a writer is able to incorporate, real life details into the story because it just adds that certain level of authenticity
Yeah.
to it.
So yeah, so all of the Tel Aviv scenes and the New York scenes as well.
Sure.
But all of the Tel Aviv scenes are absolutely like there. Those streets. They're walking down Rothschild Street. She's been there. I've been there. It's a
Hmm.
real place. So yeah.
Okay, well that's great. Again, the book is The World Between. So Ziva, so how have the reactions been from the reading public? I mean, have you gotten people who live in Israel saying, "Oh, this, I know exactly where this is," or people maybe they've had family or they've had, their parents have had to go through this kind of thing. And like, did they have similar experiences, or it's a lot of this I can relate to exactly what the narrator is going through? I mean, what have the reactions been?
So far, I've had really good reactions. Everybody who's read the book, who's at least told me, um, liked the book and found it. so someone I know, a friend wrote to me this morning saying, I've just finished your book, and found it, well, she used the word breathtaking, which is really nice.
Hmm.
But also this idea of the kind of dreamlike quality of it. She really, she was incredibly complimentary. And she said that it reminded her of History of Love and Heart of Darkness together, but
Hmm.
something completely different. Another friend likened it to something by Thomas Mann, and something else. So people's reactions, I think, have been very positive up until now. I mean, the book just came out on the 24th, so
Hmm.
I'm hoping. I do think that some people are finding it a bit of a puzzle. You know, people who are used to reading a linear story. This is
Hmm.
not that. The idea here is that it will come together in a way, like if I think of like influences, I love the work of Marguerite Duras. The Lover was, I think, something that I was trying to channel here, of where
Hmm.
we get very different historical moments that kind of come together, and somehow at the end of all of this we see the full picture, the full tapestry of this woman's life. And I think, I'm hoping that I did a good enough job that by the end, the reader sort of feels like a sense of satisfaction. They might feel sadness or happiness or whatever it is, whatever emotion they're experiencing, but I'm hoping for a sense of, ah, I get it, you know.
Okay, that's
Um,
great. That's great. So, okay, so The World Between is out now. So, what is next? I mean, do you have another one already in progress? Are you still kind of like tinkering around with ideas?
so I have like, I've got like three projects that I want to work on.
Hmm.
I'm currently working, I think, on a shorter piece right now, sort of giving me a break from the longer stuff. Also, I find that, you know, I had a book come out last year and now this one's come out this year. And promotion and book talks and book tours and all of that just takes a long time, you know. And then the whole social media aspect, right, where you have to, you know, post here about this or somebody else's book, and you want to be a good literary citizen.
Hmm.
So all of that takes a lot of time. And what I'm excited about is that I'm actually retiring at the end of April. And the goal is to be writing as much as possible once that happens.
Well, of
So
course,
I'm,
of course.
you know, really excited about that.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, Zeeva Bukai, and the book is The World Between. Zeeva, where can people find you online? You talked about social media. I mean, I know you have
Yeah.
a website, and where can they find you on social platforms?
So I have a website, which is zevabukai.com. And the social platforms that I'm on are Facebook and Instagram. Those are my two main ones. I'm also on LinkedIn, and Threads. I used to be on X, but I'm not really on X anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's about it. Oh, and I did want to say one thing, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, sure. Go
To
ahead.
just plug my first book, which was The Anatomy of Exile, that just won the National Jewish Book Award for debut fiction.
Very nice.
So
Congratulations.
thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited about that, and shocked and happy and exhilarated, frankly. That book took
Hmm.
me 10 years to write. So if anybody's interested in the first one, that would be great too. But the world between for me is kind of a love letter,
Hmm.
I feel. You know, it's a love letter to the people in my life who really went through um, real hardship.
Hmm. And,
So
and people can get both of those through your website?
they can get them, yeah, they can find them on my website, and meaning that they can find links to Amazon,
Ah,
Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, and anywhere that you can, you know, that you find books. And then the other thing is if listeners, two things. One, please ask your local bookstore to, you know, for the book. If you're inclined to go to your local bookstore, that would be amazing to kind of get it into bookstores. And the other thing is how important it is for readers to actually write reviews for authors.
Hmm.
It makes a world of difference. I don't know why, but it does, in terms of algorithm and in terms of our distributors. Distributors really look at reviews and how
Hmm.
many ratings you have on Amazon and Goodreads. Unfortunately, that is the state of affairs for
Sure.
authors. Like, in order to be able to get the next book published, you need enough buzz around the previous book. So,
Mhm. Okay. Well, that's great. And again, the book is The World Between, and we've been talking with Zeeva Bukai today. Zeeva, thank you so much for being here today. This was a great conversation.
thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here, and I had a wonderful time.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy you were here. And viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. Social media and online presence for me, you've got my screenwriting blog at maximumz.blog. For Twitter, this show is still at podcast CWL, and it's also at podcast CWL on Blue Sky. For me, I don't have a personal Twitter account anymore, but I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram. Those are both at Pez Screenwriting, just like the candy. You can also check out my Go Ahead and Ask books. Those are the ones on Amazon, the ones about screenwriting and pie, two very wonderful things. Like I said, that's Ziva. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.